As Russian forces advanced toward Kyiv in 2022, Ukraine's defenders prepared a desperate stand to shield their capital. Russian armored columns pushed south from Belarus, expecting Kyiv to fall within days. Yet Ukraine's resistance was ready. Ukraine's intelligence intercepted movements, allowing defenders to prepare ambush points along key northern roads. The defenders moved fast, blocking roads, wiring charges, and preparing hit-and-run tactics in the forested outskirts. Locals aided the defense, delivering supplies and reporting Russian movements despite the danger surrounding them. Despite being outgunned, Ukraine's forces relied on mobility, terrain knowledge, and relentless determination. As the Russians advanced, the first Ukrainian ambushes struck with precision, slowing their armored columns. These early clashes shattered Russia's expectations, proving Kyiv would not fall easily or quietly. Ukraine's ambushes forced Russian units to slow down, disrupting their advance toward Kyiv's northern edges. Reports from civilians helped defenders anticipate new enemy routes, allowing Ukrainian units to reposition quickly. Ukrainian units used local knowledge to create layered traps along choke points, bridges, and narrow woodland passes. Russian vehicles, unprepared for such terrain, struggled through icy roads and became easy targets for Ukrainian fire. Ukrainian anti-armor teams moved fast between firing positions, striking hard before enemy forces could return fire. Each hit slowed the Russian column further, forcing constant regrouping and costing precious time and resources. Every minute strengthened Kyiv's defenses, giving Ukraine a crucial advantage in the early days of the invasion. By the second day, Russian forces were already moving slower than planned, their entire advance bleeding momentum. Ukrainian commanders adapted quickly, sending mobile strike teams to hit isolated vehicles along forested northern roads. Ambushes near Ivankiv and Hostomel forced Russian units to reroute, stretching supply lines dangerously thin. Without steady resupply, Russian crews struggled to refuel, repair vehicles, and maintain cohesion in freezing weather. Ukrainian artillery targeted jammed roadways, hitting convoys that had no room to maneuver or escape the bombardment. These strikes destroyed vital vehicles, deepening the chaos spreading across Russia's advance routes toward Kyiv. Ukrainian drone teams quietly guided artillery fire with remarkable accuracy from hidden shelters in the woods. Each strike stalled the invaders further, giving Kyiv critical time to reinforce its defensive lines. The plan was working: slow the advance, cut supplies, and force Russia into vulnerable choke points. Resistance groups sabotaged fuel trucks and marked enemy positions, disrupting Russian logistics deep behind lines. Small acts of sabotage caused major delays, leaving convoys immobilized and Russian commanders scrambling for control. Russian units pushed forward but faced ambushes from every side, eroding confidence and momentum. Each stalled kilometer added panic. Maps meant for a fast march now marked choke points and danger zones. Ukrainian defenders used frozen rivers, tight woods, and steep banks to funnel the enemy into deadly setup. Explosions beneath advancing vehicles shattered bridges and blocked routes, trapping Russian units for hours. With every destroyed bridge and burned truck, Russia's timetable collapsed, forcing them into desperate improvisation. Ukraine had turned the northern approach into a maze of ambushes and delays, draining the invasion's momentum. Nearing Kyiv's outskirts, territorial defense units fortified neighborhoods, transforming streets into defensive lines. Civilians carried food and ammunition to the front, helping defenders hold positions despite mounting pressure. Families sheltered underground as distant artillery grew louder, shaking basements and rattling fragile windows. Above them, defense forces positioned anti-tank teams along narrow streets, preparing for brutal urban fighting. Meanwhile, Russian forces attempted to regroup north of Kyiv, but disorganized formations left them exposed. Fuel shortages worsened, stranding entire sections of the Russian column with dead engines in freezing conditions. Ukrainian scouts tracked the struggling enemy and marked new targets as Russian frustration grew visible. With enemy momentum fading, Ukraine prepared its next phase, striking hard enough to force a full retreat. Ukraine launched coordinated counterstrikes, hitting stalled Russian units before they could reorganize or repair vehicles. Precision mortar teams targeted choke points, trapping Russian vehicles in forests with nowhere left to maneuver. Each successful strike forced troops to abandon vehicles, leaving equipment scattered across the frozen landscape. Ukrainian units advanced cautiously, securing disabled vehicles and clearing paths through debris-filled forest roads. Some captured vehicles were repaired and reused, giving Ukraine unexpected reinforcements taken directly from the enemy. Others were destroyed to block roads, ensuring Russian forces remained trapped in narrow routes for hours. Low on fuel and coordination, Russian forces grew increasingly vulnerable to rapid Ukrainian assaults. Ukraine's mobility and timing turned the battlefield, striking wherever enemy lines weakened or became exposed. As pressure shifted, Ukrainian units pushed northward, turning the retreating invaders into the hunted. Recon teams reported collapsing morale among Russian troops, forced to abandon positions during freezing nights. Ukrainian snipers took key vantage points, targeting officers and drivers to disrupt Russian coordination further. Each precise hit deepened confusion, forcing Russian units to halt or retreat under mounting pressure. Night raids intensified as Ukrainian units struck supply points, keeping Russian logistics in constant turmoil. Explosions lit the night sky as ammunition depots and fuel sites erupted under Ukrainian precision strikes. Destroying supplies forced Russian troops into severe shortages, crippling their ability to maintain any advance. These coordinated actions made clear that Russia's once rapid advance was now grinding to a frozen halt. With Russian forces stalled, Ukrainian units seized initiative, launching counterattacks along key northern routes. These counterattacks aimed to reclaim territory lost during the first chaotic days of the invasion. Russian supply trucks rarely reached the front intact as Ukrainian strikes intensified along supply corridors. With each failed delivery, Russian troops grew more isolated, lacking food, fuel, and clear communication. Ukrainian units expanded their presence along forest lines, preparing coordinated multi-direction attacks. These movements allowed Ukraine to strike weak points simultaneously, overwhelming scattered enemy formations. On several fronts, Russian troops were caught off guard, retreating in confusion as Ukrainian fire intensified. What once looked like a swift march toward Kyiv became a grinding struggle, exposing the invasion's deep flaws. Russian vehicles clogged narrow routes, creating jams that left entire columns exposed to attack. Ukraine exploited this paralysis, striking immobilized units with artillery, anti-tank teams, and precise ambushes. Some convoys were abandoned entirely as crews retreated into forests, leaving equipment for Ukraine to capture. Captured fuel and supplies helped Ukrainian forces maintain their tempo while Russian mobility collapsed rapidly. In many sectors, Ukraine pressed while Russian units struggled merely to regroup or escape encirclement. Coordination broke down entirely as isolated Russian pockets crossed woods with little communication. Retreating units moved blindly through forests, unsure where friendly lines were or where ambushes waited ahead. By now, Russia's advance on Kyiv had lost momentum entirely. Trapped in a maze of Ukrainian resistance, Ukrainian defenses strengthened daily, turning rural fields and forests into layered obstacles for the invaders. Every delay made Russian supply routes longer and more exposed, forcing desperate attempts to keep units resupplied. Ukraine targeted these fragile routes relentlessly, isolating Russian units until many became completely cut off from fuel and shelter. Russian soldiers endured freezing nights with minimal supplies or communication. Ukraine exploited this exhaustion, launching night raids that shattered already weakened enemy morale. These raids destroyed fuel, ammunition, and command posts, leaving Russian forces unable to coordinate effectively. With their lines collapsing, many Russian units abandoned heavy equipment to escape Ukraine's tightening pressure. Ukraine had halted the advance on Kyiv, slowed it, broken it, and now pushed it backward through frozen forests. By early March, the Russian offensive around Kyiv was exhausted, its scattered units unable to regain momentum. Ukrainian drone reconnaissance documented these scattered units, guiding ground forces to collapsing enemy lines. Retreating convoys left trails of destroyed vehicles, marking the path of a broken and collapsing advance. Ukrainian forces pushed behind the retreat, reclaiming towns that had endured the first shock of the invasion. Some settlements showed fierce fighting, burned homes, collapsed walls, and streets scarred by artillery fire. Each liberated street provided evidence that Russia's advance had fractured under its own chaos and miscalculations. For the first time since February, Kyiv's defenders saw undeniable signs that enemy forces were pulling back. The push toward Kyiv had failed, and now Ukraine was reclaiming the land the enemy had fought hard to seize. Engineers worked tirelessly to clear mines and debris, opening paths for advancing troops and humanitarian aid. Villagers emerged cautiously, relieved yet shaken, offering information about hidden traps and abandoned positions. These first-hand accounts guided troops to hidden traps, abandoned shelters, and escape routes used by retreating forces. Some areas showed signs of fierce battles. Spent casings, burned trees, and trenches carved deep into frozen ground. Ukrainian forces met pockets of resistance, but most Russian troops were already falling back in disarray. A coordinated counteroffensive reclaimed village after village, transforming defense into a sweeping liberation. Liberation brought relief, but also grief, as residents uncovered destruction left behind by the retreating forces. Each restored settlement strengthened Ukraine's lines and pushed the enemy farther from the capital's outskirts. Advancing units moved deeper into contested forests, clearing out abandoned posts and shattered Russian positions. Many enemy shelters revealed hurried retreats, discarded ammunition, broken radios, and half-finished fortifications. Captured maps showed how severely Russia's advance fractured under poor planning, supply issues, and fierce resistance. Vast sections of the northern front lay abandoned, marked by trenches, wrecks, and deep signs of panic. Ukraine moved swiftly, reclaiming positions captured during the invasion's chaotic first days. Humanitarian teams followed behind the advancing troops, bringing medicine, warmth, and reassurance to civilians. Though battle scars remained, the return of Ukrainian control marked a turning point in the fight for the capital. For residents emerging from shelters, Kyiv's defenders became symbols of hope after weeks of terror and uncertainty. Russian forces tried regrouping along northern routes, but depleted units were too damaged to regain momentum. Ukraine advanced aggressively, targeting weakened positions and reclaiming control of key Kyiv perimeter junctions. With every engagement, Russian forces lost ground, often abandoning damaged armor rather than defend it. Many units retreated chaotically, scattering into forest routes that only deepened their disorganization. Ukrainian troops captured dozens of vehicles, weapons, and vital supplies, critical resources for sustaining Kyiv's defense. Reopened roads allowed humanitarian convoys to reach liberated towns, delivering aid where it was needed most. Road by road, Ukraine restored control, pushing Russian forces deeper into forests and away from Kyiv's defenses. The defenders had turned a desperate stand into a strategic reversal, forcing invaders into a full retreat. As March advanced, Ukraine pushed further north, reclaiming territory once believed lost in the invasion's opening days. What remained of Russia's advance were wrecked vehicles, shattered trenches, and abandoned fortifications. Investigators documented the devastation, preserving evidence of the battles that shaped Kyiv's survival. Every ruined bridge and burned truck told the same story. The advance on Kyiv had collapsed completely. For Kyiv's defenders, victory meant more than survival. It proved the capital would never fall without a fight. Families returned to shattered homes, finding ruins in some places, yet hope stronger than the scars of occupation. Ukraine had not only defended its capital, but shattered a far larger force and rewritten the battle's outcome. The world watched as Kyiv stood unbroken, its defenders turning the impossible into a defining moment of courage.